The celestial archive floated in the space between galaxies, a structure so vast that entire moons served as its storage chambers. For 3 million years, the keepers had recorded every form of connection that sentient beings created. They documented the mating bonds of the owl, who shared one nervous system between two bodies. They studied the hive unity of the, where a billion minds thought as one. They analyzed the pack loyalty of the clans, written into their very DNA. Had served as senior keeper for 200,000 years. His crystalline body held memories that would take lifetimes to review. He had seen species rise and fall. He had watched empires built on unity crumble into dust. He believed, with the certainty of ancient experience, that he understood every possible way that living things could bond with one another. The human ship appeared on a Tuesday, though did not know humans measured time that way. It was a small diplomatic vessel, standard design, carrying an ambassador and her team. The keepers sent the usual welcome protocols and prepared the usual documentation procedures. This would be, assumed, another routine entry in the archive. Ambassador Sarah stepped into the archive's greeting hall with her security team. She was a small woman by human standards, with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes that suggested she smiled often. Behind her walked Doctor, listed in the manifest as the missions. He was taller, with brown skin and hands that moved constantly, as if always reaching for something to examine. Process their biological data automatically. Humans were carbon-based, short-lived, and unremarkable. They had no telepathic abilities, no hive structure, no chemical bonding mechanisms. They formed pair bonds for reproduction, showed some pack loyalty in family groups, and displayed typical mammalian social patterns. Nothing interesting, nothing new. The formal tour began, guided them through chambers that held the relationship records of 10,000 species. He showed them the bonding crystals of the, where couples literally merged their consciousnesses. He demonstrated the pheromone locks of the X, whose family units became chemically dependent on each other's presence. Fascinating, said, leaning close to examine a display. Look at this one. Moved to her side immediately. The neural synchronization is incredible, but doesn't it limit individual growth? Probably, replied. Remember what happened with the quantum collective. Too much unity, not enough flexibility. They spoke easily, finishing each other's thoughts sometimes, but not in the way of telepaths. There was something else there, something couldn't quite categorize. They stood at a comfortable distance from each other, not touching, but somehow clearly connected. How long have you known each other? Asked, curious despite himself. 23 years, answered. We met in graduate school. Sarah was studying interstellar diplomacy, and I was trying to understand xenobiology. We ended up in the same terrible apartment building. Broke my coffee maker the first week, added, smiling. I broke his favorite mug in revenge. Then we decided to stop fighting and start talking instead. Sensors flickered with confusion. You damaged each other's property, and this created a bond. No, said. We apologized, realized we were both stressed and broke, and decided to be friends instead of enemies. The bond came from the choice, not the conflict. The word friends translated poorly into language. It seemed to mean voluntary pack member or perhaps chosen alliance partner, but neither translation felt accurate. He filed the question away and continued the tour. They reached the secure vault where the archive kept its most dangerous artifacts. One chamber held an empathic parasite, locked behind 6 layers of containment. The creature had been captured 50,000 years ago, after it destroyed an entire civilization. It fed on emotional bonds, amplifying them until they became toxic and destructive. Mated pairs would kill each other under its influence, explained through the observation window. The parasite takes love and twists it into obsession. It takes loyalty and turns it into blind fanaticism. We keep it here to study, but it is never released. As he spoke, alarms suddenly blazed through the chamber. The containment fields flickered, and emergency lights bathed everything in red. An automated voice announced a critical failure in the vault systems. The parasite's chamber cracked open. Felt terror for the first time in. The parasite emerged as a writhing shape of darkness and hunger, searching for emotional connections to corrupt. His training took over immediately. He began sealing sections, initiating lockdown procedures, but he was too slow. The parasite found and it struck like lightning, a psychic assault that bypassed all physical defenses. Had seen this before. He knew what came next. The humans would turn on each other, their bond twisted into something monstrous. They would hurt each other in ways they would never recover from, even if they survived. Gasped and staggered, caught her arm steadying her. The parasite wrapped around them both, feeding, growing stronger. But they did not attack each other. His hand found and gripped tight. She said, her voice strained but clear. Remember the semester we both failed organic chemistry. His face was twisted with pain, but he laughed. You blamed me for distracting you with terrible movies. They were terrible, agreed, but I watched every single one. The parasite shrieked, a sound that shattered 3 observation panels and made its crystalline structure vibrate with agony. It was feeding on their bond, trying to amplify it into destructive obsession, but something was going wrong. I'm sorry I missed your sister's wedding, said, teeth clenched. I know I said work was too busy, but I was actually just scared of seeing your family. I know, replied. I was angry for months, but you apologized and you came to the next family reunion, and you've been there for every important thing since. You forgave me, said, even though you didn't have to. I chose to, said simply. The parasite was screaming now, thrashing between them. It couldn't understand what it was touching. Every bond it had ever consumed was built on need, biology, or compulsion. Mated pairs needed each other. Hive minds were compelled to unity. Pack members were driven by instinct. But these humans just chose each other. Every day, apparently, for 23 years. They had fought and forgiven. They had hurt each other and apologized. They had grown in different directions and chosen to stay connected anyway. Their bond wasn't strong because it was unbreakable. It was strong because they kept repairing it. The parasite couldn't feed on that. It couldn't twist choice into obsession. It couldn't amplify what was already being freely given. With a final, agonized wail, the parasite fled back into its containment chamber. The field snapped back into place, trapping it once more. The alarms went silent, and stood in the center of the vault, still holding hands, breathing hard. They looked at each other and started laughing first, a slightly hysterical sound of relief. Joined him, and they leaned against each other, shaking with leftover adrenaline and mirth. Approached slowly, his sensors working frantically to process what he had just witnessed. That should have killed you, he said. Or worse, I have seen that creature destroy civilizations. Yeah, that was terrifying, said, still catching his breath. But we've survived worse arguments than whatever that thing was trying to make us have. Arguments echoed. Sure, said. Last year we had a huge fight about whether I should take a promotion that would mean less time for field work with. We both said things we regretted, but we apologized, talked it through, and figured out a compromise. We're not bonded by biology or destiny or whatever, added. We're friends because we keep choosing to be friends, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Opened a new file in the archive systems. He marked it with the highest priority designation, the classification reserved for discoveries that changed everything. He had found something new, something that would require years of study, something that might be the most powerful bond in the universe precisely because it was the most fragile, the most voluntary, the most human. He would call it friendship, and he would learn what that truly meant. 6 months passed. Studied the humans obsessively, deploying every scanning technology the archive possessed. He mapped their neural patterns during conversation. He analyzed their communication for pheromone signals and found none. He searched for quantum entanglement between their minds and discovered only ordinary electromagnetic activity. And simply talked to each other. They shared meals and stories. They argued about small things and big things. They made each other laugh with references that translators struggled to understand. The other keepers thought he was wasting time. "They are friends," his subordinate said, using the human word. "Many species have cooperative partnerships. This is not remarkable." But knew better. He had felt the parasite's confusion, its inability to corrupt what it found in the humans. There was something here that the archive had never properly documented. He invited and to participate in a formal documentation process. They would allow themselves to be observed, scanned, and studied in exchange for full access to the archive's resources. Both humans agreed immediately. The testing began. Watched work through a crisis simulation, one designed to measure stress responses and decision-making. Halfway through, when the scenario became overwhelming, she paused and sent a message to. Just 3 words, "Need a break." Appeared in the observation room 10 minutes later with 2 cups of coffee. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just sat with her while she described the impossible choices the simulation kept forcing her to make. He listened, offered no solutions, and simply said, "That sounds really hard." Finished her coffee and went back to the simulation. She scored better afterward. The next day faced his own test, a complex xenobiology puzzle that adapted to defeat every solution he attempted. After 2 hours of failure, he became frustrated, then angry with himself. Monitoring from another room simply sent him a message. "Remember the Titan algae problem." Went still, then started laughing. He approached the puzzle differently, and within 30 minutes he had solved it. Later, asked about the message. "The Titan algae problem was something we worked on together during graduate school," she explained. "We spent 3 months failing before we realized we were approaching it from the wrong angle. Gets stuck in his own head sometimes. I just reminded him that failure isn't permanent." "This is tactical communication," observed. "You maintain detailed files on each other's psychological patterns and deploy that knowledge to enhance performance." "No," said, frowning. "I just know my friend, and I help him when he needs it because that's what friends do." Documented the exchange but struggled to categorize it. The humans were sharing information and providing support, but not through any formal protocol. They simply knew each other, deeply and completely, because they had chosen to pay attention for 23 years. He decided to test the durability of the bond. The simulation was carefully designed, was working in his laboratory when alarms began blaring. A quarantine breach. A dangerous sample had been mishandled and protocols had failed. The data clearly showed that had made a critical error in his safety procedures. The contamination was spreading. People could die. In her role as mission commander, received the incident report. She had 2 choices: contain the situation quietly and protect career, or report it officially and face serious consequences. The regulations were clear. She had to report it. Watched neural patterns carefully. She was stressed, angry even. She sent a message, "My office, now." Arrived within 5 minutes, his face pale. He had already reviewed the data. He knew what he had done. "I'm sorry," he started, but held up a hand. "Did you follow the established protocols?" she asked. "I thought I did, but clearly something went wrong. I missed something, or maybe I was tired, I don't know, it's my fault." Pulled up the data on her screen. "Look at this. Your procedure was fine. The failure was in the containment system itself, but the official report will blame the researcher by default unless we can prove equipment failure." "You can't risk your career protecting me," said immediately. "Report what the data shows. I'll deal with the consequences." "The data shows a system failure," said firmly. "And it shows that you followed every protocol correctly. I'm reporting exactly that." Sarah, if you're wrong, they'll remove you from command. Then I'll be wrong. But I'm not going to throw you to the bureaucrats when I know you did your job right. Watched as spent the next 3 hours building a case. She pulled maintenance records, cross-referenced safety logs, and interviewed the engineering team. She found the flaw in the containment system, a deterioration that had gone unnoticed during routine inspections. Helped her even though it would have been easier for him to simply accept blame and move on. They worked side by side, sometimes in comfortable silence, sometimes arguing about technical details. When the report was finished, submitted it with her full authority behind it. The investigation cleared completely and led to a system-wide review of containment equipment. But the situation left damage, had made enemies among the Safety Oversight Committee who felt she had overstepped her authority, felt guilty for being the cause of her political problems. They argued about it later in private, where censors could still observe them. Their voices rose, accused of being too willing to sacrifice himself, accused of being too stubborn to accept that sometimes the system needed a scapegoat. "I won't let them scapegoat you," said. "You don't get to make that choice for me," replied. "Yes, I do, because you're my friend and friends protect each other. Even when it hurts you. Especially then." They stood in angry silence for a long moment, then sighed. "I'm sorry, you're right, and thank you for having my back." "Always," said. "But you're making dinner for the next week because you were being an idiot about this." "Fair enough." They smiled at each other, and the tension dissolved. Added 17 new observations to his file. The bond had survived stress by being tested. The humans had fought and forgiven. They had protected each other at personal cost, and somehow, impossibly, they had emerged with their friendship stronger than before. Reviewed his data and remained skeptical. "All bonds are tested by stress," she said. "The owl-mated pairs survive far worse." "The owl have no choice," replied. "They are bound. Separation means death. These humans can walk away at any moment and they choose not to." "That makes them weak," I said. "No," said slowly. "I think it makes them something else, something we have never properly understood." He requested permission to present his preliminary findings to the High Council. The Council, composed of the eldest keepers from across the archive, agreed to review his work. They were not impressed. "You have documented a cooperative partnership," the council leader said, her voice like grinding stone. "This exists in thousands of species. It is not remarkable." "With respect, Elder, you are wrong," said. "I have watched these humans survive an empathic parasite that destroys civilizations. I have watched them maintain their bond through conflict, stress, and personal cost. They do not bond through biology or compulsion. They bond through continuous choice." "Choice is not stronger than instinct," another council member said. "Then test them," replied. "Design a scenario that breaks bonds. The archive has thousands of such scenarios. Use them." The council conferred silently, their minds linked in the ancient way of the keepers. Finally, the leader spoke. "Very well. We will design a definitive test. If these humans survive it, we will consider your findings. If they fail, you will abandon this line of research." "Agreed," said. The council worked for 3 days, consulting the archive's records of every bond that had ever broken. They designed something cruel, something that exploited the exact weaknesses they had observed in human behavior: ambition, self-interest, and the desire to protect loved ones. They called into separate chambers. Was offered the admiralty position she had pursued her entire career. It was everything she had worked for, the culmination of decades of service. There was only one condition. She had to provide testimony that judgment was compromised, that his recent mistakes showed a pattern of unreliability that made him unsuitable for sensitive research positions. The testimony would be classified, would never know it came from her. His career would end quietly with a transfer to some minor posting, but he would be safe and would have everything she wanted. In another chamber, faced his own choice. He was offered unlimited funding for his life's work, research into a cure for muscular dystrophy, the disease that was slowly killing his younger sister. The funding would guarantee he could save her, along with thousands of others suffering from the condition. The price was simple. He needed to provide classified psychological assessments of decision-making during the parasite incident. The data would show, with proper framing, that she had frozen under pressure, that she had endangered the mission through hesitation. Her career would be over, but the information would be sealed. She would never know he had betrayed her, and his sister would live. The council watched both humans through their sensors, waiting for the negotiation, the rationalization, the eventual acceptance. Ambition broke bonds. It happened in every species. Humans were no different. Took 40 seconds to review the offer. Then she looked directly at the observation panel, though she couldn't see through it. "No," she said simply. "I don't know what game you're playing, but the answer is no. The Admiralty is what you have worked toward your entire life," the council leader said through the speakers. "Not like this," replied. "Hasn't done anything wrong. I won't lie about him to get a promotion. I wouldn't be able to live with myself. He would never know. I would know, and that's enough." In the other chamber had a similar reaction. He stared at the offer for a long moment, and his hands shook. His sister's face appeared in his mind, the way she used to run before the disease confined her to a wheelchair. Then he stood up. "No, Sarah hasn't done anything wrong. I saw her during the parasite attack. She was incredible. I won't destroy her career, even to save my sister." "Your sister will die without this treatment," the council said. "Then I'll find another way, but I won't betray my friend." The council reconvened in stunned silence. Both humans had refused immediately, without negotiation or hesitation. The scenario was designed to be impossible to resist. It offered everything each human wanted most in the world. But they had chosen friendship instead. A spoke first. "They are irrational." "No," said quietly. "They are something else, something we have not seen before." The council leader studied the data for a long time. Finally, she said, "Continue the test. We need to understand the limits of this behavior." The scenario escalated, and were transported to a deteriorating space station, an old research facility that had been scheduled for decommission. They were separated into different sections, with communication limited to text messages. The station's life support was failing. There was one escape pod equipped for a single occupant. The systems were clear. One person could leave safely. 2 people attempting to use the pod would exceed its capacity and fail. Both would die. The countdown began. 60 minutes until life support collapsed completely. Immediately began trying to override the pod systems. Did the same from his section. They sent messages back and forth, technical ideas, possible solutions. Each attempt failed. 40 minutes remaining. "Sarah, you need to take the pod sent. You're the commander, the mission needs you." "Absolutely not," replied. "Your research is too important, you take it." "My research means nothing compared to your diplomatic work. Stop being noble and get in the damn pod." 30 minutes. Both humans were working frantically now, trying to find a solution that would save them both. They ripped apart wall panels, rerouted power systems, and attempted to jury-rig solutions from materials that were never meant to work together. 20 minutes. "If neither of us gets in the pod, we both die," sent. "That's stupid, Sarah. Please, I'm asking you as my friend. Get in the pod." "I'm your friend," replied, "which means I can't do that." 15 minutes. Watched their vital signs. Both humans were experiencing extreme stress, but neither was moving toward the pod. They were still trying to find a solution that saved them both, even as time ran out. 10 minutes. suddenly stopped moving. He had found something in the pod's schematics, a compression configuration that was marked as medically inadvisable. It would allow two people to fit, barely, by using an emergency storage space that was meant for equipment. One person would have to endure extreme physical compression for the journey. The risk of permanent injury was high. He sent the schematics to 5 minutes. I'll take the compression position, sent. Like hell you will, replied. I'm smaller, I'll fit better. You're also more valuable. Stop saying that. 3 minutes. They met at the pod, still arguing. Tried to physically push into the main chamber. Refused to move. They were wasting precious seconds. Said, her voice breaking, please, I can't lose you. You won't, said, because we're both going to survive, but I'm taking the compression position and that's final. Why? Because you refused the Admiralty for me. Because you've protected me 100 times. Because you're my best friend and I'm not letting you die when there's any option to prevent it. 2 minutes. Stopped fighting. She helped configure the compression chamber, working with hands that shook from fear and exhaustion. She climbed into the main pod, folded himself into a space that looked impossibly small. 1 minute. If you die from this, I'm going to kill you, said. Laughed a pained sound. That's illogical. I don't care. The pod launched just as life support failed completely. The compression was agonizing for, monitored his vital signs during the journey, watching them fluctuate dangerously. She kept talking to him, forcing him to stay conscious to keep fighting. They made it back to the archive's main facility. Medical teams extracted from the compression chamber. He had 3 cracked ribs, severe bruising and muscle damage that would require surgery, but he would survive. Refused to leave his side during the medical procedures. The council gathered in the observation room above the medical bay. They reviewed the data in silence, processing what they had witnessed. They modified the escape pod in a way that violated safety protocols and risked both their lives, said. This behavior is not rational. They chose a risky solution over a safe one that required betrayal, replied. That is not irrational, that is something else. The council leader spoke, her voice heavy with something that might have been wonder. In 3 million years of documentation, we have never seen a bond like this. It is not biological. It is not compulsory. It requires constant maintenance and can be ended at any moment. Yet it survives tests that break bonds forged by instinct and chemistry. Human friendship, said, operates on principles we did not know were possible. It is simultaneously the most fragile and most durable bond in the archive. Explain, the council leader commanded. Organized his thoughts, drawing on 6 months of observation. Most bonds are strong because they resist change. The owl cannot separate. The cannot individuate. Their bonds endure by being static, unchangeable. But human friendship endures by adapting. It is damaged and repaired, stressed and renewed, tested and proven continuously throughout its existence. He pulled up comparative data. When the parasite attacked the humans, it could not corrupt their bond because it was already built on choice rather than compulsion. When we offered them their deepest desires, they refused because betrayal would make them people they did not want to be. When we forced them to choose between survival and loyalty, they chose to find a third option together. The strength comes from the maintenance, said slowly, understanding dawning. The effort is not a weakness, it is the source of the bond's power. Precisely, said. Humans build relationships the way they build muscles, through deliberate stress and recovery. Every argument that ends in forgiveness makes the bond stronger. Every choice to maintain the friendship despite easier alternatives reinforces it. Every act of support, freely given, deepens it. The council was silent for a long time. Finally, the leader spoke. This changes everything. If bonds built on choice can be stronger than bonds built on biology, then everything we know about social structures must be reconsidered. She turned to, "You will prepare a full report. The archive must understand this completely, and the humans must be given access to all our facilities. We have much to learn from them." Felt something he had not experienced in excitement. "I will begin immediately." Over the following weeks, word spread through the archive. Researchers from a dozen species came to observe the humans. Some were skeptical, others were fascinated. A few began experimenting with voluntary bonds in their own cultures, with mixed results. Recovered from the political damage of the equipment incident and eventually did receive her admiralty, earned rather than given. Research into muscular dystrophy received proper funding through legitimate channels, and his sister responded well to the experimental treatments. They remained friends, of course. They argued about new things, supported each other through new challenges, and continued choosing each other day after day, year after year. Completed his report and sealed it with a designation that had never been used in the archive's 3 million-year history. Testimony that changed the witness. In the report's conclusion, he wrote, "The strongest bonds in the universe are not the ones that cannot break. They are the ones that are chosen, maintained, tested, and renewed by beings who could walk away at any moment but choose to stay. Humans call this friendship, and it may be their greatest achievement. Every civilization that truly understands this principle undergoes fundamental transformation. The archive itself has been transformed by witnessing it. We recommend immediate and comprehensive study of human social bonds, with particular attention to the mechanisms of choice, forgiveness, and voluntary renewal. We have documented bonds of necessity, bonds of biology, and bonds of compulsion. We have finally documented the bond of choice, freely maintained across time and hardship. It is, perhaps, the most sophisticated social technology in recorded history. And it exists simply because two people decided it should, and kept deciding forever." The report was distributed to every known civilization in the archive's network. Some species could not implement friendship as humans understood it. Their biology or psychology simply worked too differently. But others found ways to adapt the principle, creating new forms of chosen bonds that enriched their cultures. Humans were granted full archive access and invited to serve as special consultants on social bond research. The archive's understanding of relationships expanded exponentially as researchers learned to distinguish between different types of choice, maintenance, and renewal, and participated in countless studies, answered thousands of questions, and patiently explained the same concepts repeatedly to species who struggled to understand voluntarism. "Why do you maintain this bond when it requires so much effort?" A owl researcher asked them one day, and looked at each other and smiled. They had been asked this question in 100 different ways by 100 different species. The answer never changed. "Because it's worth it," said simply. "Because friendship makes us better," added. "Not better at tasks or survival, better at being the people we want to be. And because we choose to," they said together. The owl researcher processed this for a long moment, their bonded pair consulting with each other through their shared nervous system. Finally, they said, "We understand choice as concept. We do not understand choosing difficulty when ease is available." "That's okay," said kindly. "Not every species needs to understand it. We're just glad we do." Years passed. The archive's understanding of human friendship deepened and expanded. Other species began their own experiments with voluntary bonds. Some succeeded brilliantly. Others failed spectacularly. A few created entirely new forms of relationship that combined choice with their unique biology. Eventually retired from active service and took a teaching position at the archive, training young diplomats from dozens of species. Continued his research, now with collaborative teams spanning multiple civilizations. His work on muscular dystrophy led to breakthroughs in cross-species genetic therapy. They remained friends. They grew older, moved through different phases of life, faced new challenges, and celebrated new victories. The bond between them continued to exist because they continued to choose it. In his final report before entering deep storage for recovery, wrote, "The humans taught us that the most powerful force in the universe is not gravity, not entropy, not even time. It is choice, consistently made across every moment of existence. They taught us that bonds do not need to be unbreakable to be eternal. They need only to be chosen again and again by people who understand that the choosing itself is what makes them strong." The archive has recorded 3 million years of social bonds. We finally understand that we were measuring the wrong variable. We measured durability when we should have measured intentionality. We measured resistance to change when we should have measured adaptation. We measured the bonds that could not break when we should have been studying the bonds that were repaired after breaking. Humanity's greatest gift to the universe is not their technology, their art, or their science. It is their demonstration that chosen loyalty, freely maintained, is the foundation of the most powerful bonds existence has ever witnessed. This keeper is honored to have witnessed it. The archive is better for having recorded it, and the universe is changed by having learned it. The report ended with a simple notation. Friendship, as humans understand it, is the most powerful bond ever witnessed by the Celestial Archive. This conclusion is definitive. And never read the full report, though they knew it existed. They were too busy living the reality of what had spent years trying to document. On the anniversary of their first meeting, now 31 years past, they shared a meal in the archive's observation deck, watching distant galaxies spin in the darkness. "Do you ever think about how weird it is that we ended up here?" asked two graduate students who met because we lived in the same terrible building, now teaching aliens about friendship. Laughed, "Every single day. Remember when our biggest problem was the broken coffee maker? I still feel bad about that." "I know. You've apologized approximately 200 times over 3 decades. 207 actually. I've kept count." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only came from decades of practice. The universe turned around them, vast and ancient and full of wonders. "Thanks for being my friend," said quietly. "Thanks for choosing to keep being mine," replied. "Always," said. "Always," agreed. And somewhere in the infinite depths of the Celestial Archive, in a file marked with the highest designation of importance, their story continued to teach civilizations what it meant to choose connection, maintain loyalty, and build bonds that existed simply because people decided they should. The most powerful bond in the universe, witnessed and recorded for all time, built on nothing more and nothing less than two people who chose each other and kept choosing forever.